Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Wolf, and I'm the programming director here at the Osterville Village Library. This afternoon, we have an exciting talk in store for you, presented by world-renowned author and historian, Anthony Sammarco, an incredibly generous friend, and coincidentally, the president of the Board of Trustees for the Osterville Village Library. Without further ado, Anthony Sammarco.
Wow. World renowned, I tell you. Is that on? Is that on? Oh, there it is. Yes, yes, perfect. I don't know about world renowned, but it sounded like a great obituary. How many people remember Prince Spaghetti and the Prince Macaroni Company? I think in a lot of ways that wonderful cartoon, or so to speak, advertisement on television of Wednesday as Prince Spaghetti Day was one of the most successful campaigns of any food industry in the 20th century. But seen here on the cover, Prince also used the herald, and the herald was somebody who was dressed as a Vatican guard with a trumpet, and it said Prince Superfine Macaroni Products. Well, this was a company that would start in 1912 in Boston. But of course, any type of macaroni, or as we call it, macaroni, would actually originate in not only China, but Italy. And in the 19th century, there were many different pasta factories that would actually not only produce a spaghetti, but a variety of different shapes. This was something that was a small business, but it was throughout Italy. And this postcard from 1900 shows a man in the foreground where he's drying the pasta. And one had to dry it, wet it, dry it, wet it. Otherwise, it would collapse when it was actually boiled. Now, during that period of time, Monzo, who was one of the largest in Naples, would have well over 400 people producing pasta. And in this instance, you began to realize it wasn't something that was done within the factory itself. It was always dried in the open air. Now, during that period of time, it was something that many people of the great traveling of Europe would actually find in some ways that macaroni was something that was quite palatable. On the left-hand side is an early 19th century painting that shows a group of street urchins actually enjoying pasta directly from the bowl. And on the right is a postcard from 1900, and it shows a young boy eating it, mangia macaroni. Well, these were things in a lot of ways that began the aspect of Americans beginning to enjoy pasta. And in a book published in 1832, Andrea de Jura explained that to eat pasta the Neapolitan way requires that the pasta be swallowed down in an uninterrupted mouthful. He said that the macaroni must be put into the mouth with both hands in such a way that there is no interval between successive mouthfuls, except what is necessary to allow the macaroni to reach the esophagus. Well, isn't that how we all eat it? No. But on the left-hand side, you can see two young boys eating what is basically pasta or spaghetti without sauce. And on the right-hand side, street vendors. So not only was pasta dried in the open air, but there were street vendors that would simply prepare pasta day in, day out. And this was the street food of choice throughout Italy. This wonderful postcard from about 1895 shows the three boys again enjoying an entire mouthful in one gulp. But it was something you began to realize. It was one of the types of things that was brought by our ancestors. And if one is of Italian descent, you realize in that instance that it was something that it was not only known, but it was brought to the New World. Now, many companies began to offer pasta as early as the 1890s. And Lagana and Poggioro were manufacturers of macaroni in Palermo, Sicily. Their company was among the first to export to the United States, and their pasta was sold exclusively at S.S. Pierce and Company in Boston. So if one could afford to shop at S.S. Pierce, and one had taken the grand tour of Europe, macaroni was something that was probably included in one's dinner. But the whole aspect was, during that period between roughly the 1870s and 1900, there was said to be over 50 different manufacturers of pasta in Italy. This is DiCola and Figli Company's finest Sicily macaroni. It's done in the classical styles as it promotes the company as having been founded in 1861 and declaring that it is a manufacturing house of superior macaroni and that they export it to all countries via rail or sea, as depicted. The woman holds a sheaf of semolina and wheat, and it was something you began to realize not only was it good, but it won gold medals, as one sees on the left-hand side. There was also Voiello pasta, and this was established in a small store in Torre Annunziata, a small town outside of Naples. My great-grandmother was Antonia Annunziata Sammarco, a world capital of pasta making since the 16th century. Voiello pasta comes in all the most popular Neapolitan shapes. Its secret is the uneven surface achieved with bronze dyes. And Voiello was acquired by Barilla in 1973. And of course, the Giuseppe Garibaldi branch macaroni, was named after the great general and nationalist who unified the various states of the Italian peninsula under one monarchy in 1861. Victor Emmanuel II was the first king of a unified Italy. So these represent only three of many, but the whole concept was, when it came to the New World, Prince Macaroni Company was one of the earliest in Boston. Now, this is a photograph of Prince Street around 1910. It shows an area that was built up primarily at the turn of the 20th century with tenements. In that instance, we began to see the North End, when it started in the 1840s with immigration, of having Irish, Germans, Jews, and of course Italians by the 1890s. In this instance, you began to see these buildings being constructed in such a way with ground floor shops and, of course, tenements above. And it was here in 1912 that Prince Pasta was started. This was started in the North End at 92 Prince Street, from which the company took its name. And in 1912, a few immigrants from Sicily started that spaghetti business. And the three founders of Prince included Gaetano Lamarca, lower circle, and he was the administrator, Giuseppe Seminara on the left, who was the salesman, and Michele Cantella below, who was the pasta maker. We began to realize these three men from Sicily who had basic education would make a pasta, which was something that people enjoyed, and it was a very saleable product. Seen here in photographs of that period, the company would grow tremendously from what was basically a storefront to a large 7-story factory on Commercial Street. But in this instance, it was started by hand, and later, by the period of 1918, was actually being produced by machinery. Well, in some ways, pasta comes in a variety of shapes, and it's always interesting. They don't really have a different flavor, but they actually look wonderful. And we can see things that are only produced what we call dies, which is a circular disc applied to the factory machine that can actually push the pasta through to make tube spaghetti or even square spaghetti. It was something that was imported, and they had Neapolitan, they had Genoese, they had Venetian pasta designs, and they were things that were typical of the region. But the Prince Herald, seen on the left-hand side with his trumpet and banner advertising superfine macaroni products, was also something that could be cut and used as a coupon for premiums and given away by the company. This was an important feature so that every box of pasta would have, of course, what we see here, a valuable premium. And for 100 premiums, you could get a dinner service. In that instance, it not only included cookware, glassware, china, but it also included a variety of different things that would continue to change in the 1950s and 1960s, as we see. So the more pasta you ate, now you could serve it on Prince pasta plates. But Prince Pasta was so successful that in 1917, the owners constructed a 7-story building on nearby Commercial Street in the North End, complete with a railroad track that entered through the back, delivering semolina flour directly to the plant. Now, we're all too young to remember the elevated railway line, but during the period at the turn of the 20th century, there was an elevated railway connecting North Station and South Station along Commercial Street and Atlantic Avenue. That would be removed during World War II for scrap metal. And as you can see on the lower right-hand side, it has a boxcar going into the factory. They would bring in tons of flour on a monthly basis. But not only did Prince advertise their superfine macaroni, but it also invented non-skid macaroni. And non-skid spaghetti typically refers to a pasta that is rough or textured surface, which helps sauces and other toppings adhere better to the noodles. And this texture also prevents the pasta from becoming too slippery. Now, I don't know about you, but it never escapes my fork. But this is a great example. And the advertisement on the lower right-hand side says the invention of non-skid spaghetti inspires deep thoughts. So it wasn't just delicious, but it made one think. Well, during that period of the 20s and 30s, Prince was really quite well known, even though they were only one of 7 manufacturers of macaroni in the North End. Prince said that they were 4 ways better than everyone else. They were lower in starch, higher in protein, fewer calories, and richer in gluten. And on the right-hand side, you see one of the factory workers holding up strands of spaghetti from that specially cut bronze die. Now, during that period, you had to realize everybody was enjoying spaghetti, and even Charles Ponzi, seen on the right-hand side, in between creating his Ponzi scheme to make Bostonians wealthy, he enjoyed a plate of Prince spaghetti. And by the late 1920s, Prince was offering spaghetti, macaroni, and egg noodles. It wouldn't be sold in the factory, but on the left-hand side, you see a Prince macaroni shop. These shops were located not just in the North End, but throughout the city of Boston. There was even one that I remember at Four Corners in Dorchester, near where I was raised. So Prince pasta was something not only available at supermarkets, but it was also available at these specialty shops. And here in a wonderful aerial view, you see not only the 7-story factory, but of course a 3-story billboard. And this is a great example of something that became not only successful within a 10-year period, but by the 1930s was one of the largest manufacturers of pasta in the United States. Now, in a lot of ways, it had grown so much that they decided to move the factory. And they moved it to what became known as Spaghettiville. Spaghettiville was a neighborhood of Lowell, Massachusetts. And the location for Prince in the North End eventually became too small, so it ended up moving to Lowell, Massachusetts in 1939. Prince Spaghettiville was in Lowell, named for the Prince plant that was located there, which was one of the largest pasta manufacturing plants of the United States at one time, employing nearly 400 people. And this was a major employer and was expanded by the Pellegrino family. Joseph Pellegrino had immigrated from Sicily in 1922 and worked at his in-laws' factory, the Roman Macaroni Company in New York. And by 1941, Pellegrino and his family had become the majority shareholders of the company, and Pellegrino became chief executive. He held that post until his son succeeded him in 1971. Pellegrino remained the company's chairman until 1987 when it was sold to Borden. So during this time, between 1941 and roughly 1945, the company was not necessarily known as Prince. It was Roman Prince Macaroni Company. He actually owned both of them, but eventually closed Roman in New York. Well, in this instance, seen here in an advertisement, the Roman Prince Macaroni Company was New England's leading brand. Macaroni, spaghetti, egg noodles, and you see in that instance that the fire which destroyed the Roman Manufacturing Company in 1939 would actually be a part of the aspect of starting the aspect of him acquiring Prince Spaghetti. Well, Gaetano Lamarca, Giuseppe Seminara, and Michele Cantella, all who hail from the same town and village in Sicily, went into business together at Prince Street in Boston in 1912, and they formed the Prince Macaroni Manufacturing Company. Prince Macaroni had a thriving market in the Italian immigrant community in North Boston, and in 1941, the business was transferred to the ownership of another Sicilian immigrant named Giuseppe or Joseph Pellegrino, seen on the left. Pellegrino was responsible for planning the iconic commercial that branded Wednesday, as Prince Spaghetti did. Well, during this period of time, this new factory, which had once been a bleachery in Lowell, became a place that began to produce some of the best pasta in the United States. But many people were unaware. How does one eat macaroni? Remember, the preponderance was few people had ever enjoyed it. So in 1945, the company produced Macaroni Magic, which was a cookbook that showed you how to boil macaroni. But it also showed you how to combine it with other ingredients to make it not only palatable, but interesting. And although it is usually identified in the North End, Prince was in fact based in Lowell for most of its existence. A sign at the city line proclaimed, "Welcome to Spaghettiville." And the company had 6 manufacturing plants, and the one in Lowell was the biggest pasta mill in the country. And Prince sold its products in 38 states. So, from what was basically a small storefront in Boston's North End, by the period of the 1960s, this had become a major business in the United States. Pellegrino, seen on the left, he was a very dapper dresser, was somebody who was a hands-on owner of this company. He not only oversaw every aspect of the business, but he continued to invest in new machinery that would continue to increase not only production, but also make it something that was available near and far. We also began to realize at that point he also would have a restaurant. Now, what better place to serve Italian food than adjacent to your factory where you made the pasta? Well, they decided to call it the Prince Grotto. And of course, most of us that have been to Europe always see these wonderful, secluded restaurants called a grotto. But on the left-hand side, which is from a very pixelated matchbook cover, you began to realize the grotto had interior as well as on a terrace overlooking the factory. On the right-hand side, you see Pellegrino, his wife Lena Real Muto, whose father had started the Roman Macaroni Company in New York, and their only child, Joseph Pellegrino. This was something you realize that was a great attraction. The Prince Grotto restaurant was the brainchild of Joseph Pellegrino, the longtime owner of Prince Manufacturing Company. And at one time, Pellegrino opened the grotto in 1959. He had already established a reputation for his work ethic, entrepreneurial skill, and for getting noticed. And in the late 1950s, Pellegrino capitalized on his idea of an upscale, fine dining experience in Lowell's Sacred Heart neighborhood. The grotto was known for dishes like shrimp scampi, eggplant parmesan, lobster stuffed chicken breast, veal scallopini alla masala, polla alla milanese, beef broccolatini, palermitano, and the famous prime rib. It was something that didn't just serve pasta, but it had a variety of things to make it not only successful, but a place people wanted to come back to. But he didn't spare money. When he created this, he also had stained glass windows as well as stained glass chandeliers throughout the restaurant. And they were made by Charles Connick Associates, one of the most prestigious companies in the United States. They made the stained glass windows for the grotto. And the New York Times once said that Connick was, quote, considered the world's greatest artisan on stained glass windows, unquote. Well, in this instance, here was Charles J. Connick. He was a prominent American painter, muralist, designer, best known for his work in stained glass in the Gothic Revival style. Ralph Adams Cram said that he was, quote, clever in adapting ancient methods to modern requirements, unquote. His stained glass studio was at 9 Harcourt Street in Boston, and it was the arts and crafts ideal in that the art was produced by a community of committed and highly skilled craftsmen. Well, Connick was well known in his day. He normally did ecclesiastical commissions, but in this instance, Pellegrino asked him to do things that dealt with Prince pasta. And what do you serve? Of course, tomato sauce. So here in the lower portion, we have a coronet of a prince, and in the 3 rondelles, we see these things of growing tomatoes. And on the right-hand side, a thing of spaghetti and a lobster. These were really quite unusual and very expensive. But the whole concept was they were people, in some instances, that invested for the future. Now, during the period between roughly 1941 and 1987, they published 4 cookbooks. And this was the Prince Italian Cookbook from 1959. It had tips on Italian cooking and, of course, a little history that you could read, the origins of macaroni. So it wasn't just something that was a cookbook that showed you different recipes and things. It told you how basically macaroni arose as the food of choice for people in Italy. They also had wonderful recipes. So you could make something like spaghetti and meatballs, which is the American aspect. It would never be done in Italy. But they also had Prince Egg Bowl casserole, Prince Egg Noodle custard, cheese noodle cake, Prince Noodle ring, Prince small egg bows and mushrooms pepperoni, and Prince fried noodles. These were things that were really unusual, and it was something, again, that would appeal to every palate. Well, many people also realized that Prince began in the 1950s to expand not just the production of macaroni, but in sauces. And Prince made marinara sauce, sauce with meat and mushroom sauce, something for every palate. So not only did you begin to realize they made the spaghetti, but they also made the sauce, and they imported Italian cheese. Parmesan would be grated and placed into small glass jars. So it was an all-included Italian meal. But on the right-hand side, it says nothing tops Prince shells except Prince mushroom sauce. And it gave you $1 back if you sent in the receipt from the glass jar of sauce. So it was a great institution, but it was also a great way to make people buy it. And here in that cookbook, you could begin to realize with the use of Prince macaroni and Prince spaghetti sauces, you could make egg bonnet casserole, elbow macaroni salad, chicken tetrazzini, spaghetti with shrimp, and baked lasagna, things that would tempt anyone. But the idea also was that children and babies loved Prince, and they would make a pastina. And chicken soup with pastina is not only delicious, but incredibly nutritious, satisfying, and comforting. Here, the Prince offered egg, carrot, spinach, beet, and banana pastina. So it was something that was easily digestible, delicious, and it was very inexpensive. During that period of time, from what had once been a horse-drawn wagon, by the 1950s, tractor trailers would be used to actually transport Prince spaghetti. Seen here in Lowell, this was something that not only had a group of people that would have 40-foot and later 48-foot containers, but they would go from New England all the way across the country with 38 states. This was a major part of the distribution, but it was also the fact that they were competing against the same company, S.S. Pierce. Now, I don't know about you. I've never eaten pasta from a can, but S.S. Pierce's red label might induce me to try it. This was lasagna with meat in sauce. Well, how delicious could it be? It says turn into a double boiler or baking dish and heat through. Well, it sounded very easy, but of course, lasagna was something that was secondary to spaghetti. And of course, they tried to do that. Sunday is Prince Lasagna Day. Unfortunately, it was never successful, but the whole aspect was lasagna is just as delicious. But the whole aspect here is that Prince and Bella Cotta actually produced a cheese. It let you cook up a holiday lasagna and get $1 refund. So that whole aspect of those premiums to acquire cookware, china, as well as even jugs of Majolica that you could use for water or wine, in this instance, is still offering a money-back product. Well, Joseph Peter Pellegrino, the son, only child, attended Phillips Andover and graduated from Harvard. His father insisted that Italian be spoken at the dinner table, and after his graduation, the younger Mr. Pellegrino joined the Marine Corps. Upon his return home, his father asked him what he wanted to do. You could be a lawyer, a doctor, he said. But the son chose the pasta business as his father put him to work unloading 100-pound bags of flour from boxcars. Great for your Harvard education. Bring your lunch in a bag, he said, and eat with the men. Well, in 1972, the younger Mr. Pellegrino became the company's president. buying regional pasta companies, maintaining customer loyalty to their brand names, and beginning to think in terms of turning from manufacturing to distributing flour. It was during his period they acquired over 7 different macaroni companies throughout the country, as well as at least a half dozen flour manufacturing companies. He and his father used advertising as one of the basic aspects of making their pasta known. And in the 1930s and 1940s, the Prince Macaroni Company sponsored an all-Italian radio talent show and the Prince Macaroni Hour, which was on WAAB in Boston. Seen here were 3 people involved in food: Aunt Jemima, the Prince of Songs, which was Prince Macaroni, and Daisy Meadows of Whiting Milk, and they sang on the radio. This was a great aspect. The radio was really the media of the day. And of course, people realized there was also television by the 1950s. And here is Imogene Coca actually advertising Prince spaghetti sauce. She said, not only is it a time saver for dinner preparation, but it is also delicious. I'm sure she never cooked a day in her life. But Imogene Coca was one of the recognizable people on television that was now being asked to actually publicize Prince. But there was also Abbott and Costello, and they were American comedians composed of not only Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, but whose work in radio, film, and television made them the most popular comedy team of the 1940s and 1950s, and the highest paid entertainers in the world during World War II. Their patter routine was Who's on First, is considered one of the most famous comedy routines of all time. Well, they were invited by Joe Pellegrino to visit Spaghettiville. They came, and they would actually see here enormous wooden trays of freshly made pasta. I think the woman on the right-hand side probably made it with her furs and hats and jewels, but that was Lou Costello's wife. But seen here, Bud and Abbott and Lou Costello worked in the television, which made them the most popular team and the highest ranking of the paid employers. But during World War II, people began to realize that Prince pasta was something that was not only available in 38 states, but it was something that was reliable. It was always good. Now, on the upper left-hand side, we see them actually clowning with the women working in the factory. They're holding sheaves of spaghetti. Each spaghetti would actually be weighed for a pound and then placed in a cardboard box. But on the lower right-hand side, in the Pellegrino's home in Andover, Massachusetts, they're actually boiling pasta, enjoying it. But these great photographs show in that instance how much was spent on the advertising campaign of this one company. And of course, during the 1950s and 1960s, Pellegrino and his wife Lena Pellegrino would travel to Italy at least once a year. Here, they brought back premiums, just like the premiums of old time, which were cookware, china, and things of that sort. Now they were bringing back Italian Majolica, and it said salute, so I assumed that it was a wine to be served with your pasta. And here on WNAC TV, Channel 7, Pellegrino, second from the left, is actually talking about these things that are available to the public for the return of premiums. This was a major part of increasing not only the sales, but making it more popular with non-Italian Americans. Of course, during that period, there was so much macaroni that Pellegrino came up with the idea of opening a restaurant called the Prince Spaghetti House. Now, this predated the Grotto. This dated to the period of the early 1940s, and it was located on the ground floor of the Hotel Avery at the corner of Washington Street and Avery Street in downtown Boston. The Prince Spaghetti House was adjacent to Peroni's, and this again was an Italian-American place where, yes, you could enjoy pasta, but also a variety of foods. This advertisement postcard from 1943 shows that not only was this called the Gourmet's Paradise, but they had a main dining room and a Neapolitan room. This was something that was big business. Many people would go to town to shop and, of course, stop for a light lunch or have dinner. In that way, you saw that the interior itself was slick, upbeat, and geared towards, again, the more broad public. The advertisement on a matchbook cover on the right-hand side is very interesting, but compare the frame of that with the frames of the mirrors on the walls. And you began to realize this advertising campaign, not only with a matchbook, but also with photographs that would then show how important this was an important way. Prince Spaghetti House was something that not only served wine, but you also had things that you could take home. You could actually take home savory Prince sauces. You could take home spaghetti dinners, or even such things as spaghetti, along with meat cakes, sausages, veal cutlets, or even veal cacciatore. But the biggest thing was pizza. Now, I love this. Tasty, tempting, delicious, piping hot, wrapped in special aluminum foil, stays 6 times hotter. 10 cents extra. Your waiter will gladly take your order. Now, a mozzarella and tomato pizza for $1.70 sounds good to me. But this was something, again, that made popular food available to a broader public. And of course, it led to what became known as the Prince House of Pizza. Now, pizza is a wonderful thing. Yes, it is an Italian street food. It can be actually made with a variety of things. But they opened one on Route 1 in Saugus in 1961. And this was something that was initially owned by Pellegrino of Prince, but it was later sold in 1961 to Victor Casaberry, seen on the lower right-hand side. These would be throughout the metropolitan Boston area. And yes, they did serve non-skid spaghetti with meat sauce. How convenient. But they served ravioli, they served lasagna, and they served pizza. Well, everyone that knows realizes that the tower does not look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but the connotation with the word pizza and Pisa wasn't lost. These were important ways to advertise something that was popular street food in Italy, and now is available, as you see on the right-hand side, as takeout. And of course, the Prince Spaghetti restaurant, seen here on the Cranberry Highway in Wareham, the gateway to Cape Cod. This was originally part of a chain of restaurants started by the Prince Spaghetti Company in Lowell in the 1950s. And other restaurants of the chain were in Somerville, Quincy, and Hyannis. So this was, again, another popular way of making this available. The Grotto, which came a little bit later, but the Prince Spaghetti House in Boston, and now the Prince House of Pizza. And of course, the competitions were incredible. Throughout that period of time, Pellegrino himself would also include such things as beautiful women who would actually have a spaghetti eating contest. Now, as you can see, they had to hold their hands behind their backs, and they couldn't use anything other than their mouths to eat the spaghetti. But it was great publicity. During the same period of time, Pellegrino would actually have Ted Williams serving a spaghetti dinner for 3,000 people at Fenway Park. So during that period, you began to realize that some of these women who enjoyed the spaghetti could become Miss Prince non-skid spaghetti. Well, seen here with her sash in the center, she's eating her spaghetti, which was textured so as to not allow the sauce to skid off the spaghetti. He was a great marketeer. And the man, in some instances, began in such a way that when he did this, he even sponsored the Mrs. Massachusetts beauty pageant. Now, in 1951, the Prince Macaroni Company did sponsor the Mrs. Massachusetts Beauty Contest, which was won, seen in the center, by Mrs. Elizabeth Nordblom of Dedham. She beat out 20 other finalists at a beauty contest witnessed by some 6,000 married women. And a happy Mr. Nordblom is on the right. Well, this had $10,000 in prizes. Now, 1951, you could buy a house for $5,000. So you began to realize not only was it successful, but it was obviously profitable. And this actually says right on the bottom, this contest is open to married women. Well, she holds her wonderful trophy, and you began to realize she would be one of many women to win. But they also would go to New Jersey, where they had a warehouse. And this was the Palisades Amusement Park in New Jersey. and they would sponsor a spaghetti eating contest for children. Now, this was something that would have hundreds of children lining up to eat pasta. Well, this is supposedly the Prince spaghetti eating champ. Well, there's still spaghetti in his bowl. I don't know how he won. But this was something you began to realize. These photographs would be seen throughout the country, and people loved it. But on the right, they all got a little badge, Prince, high protein, low calorie spaghetti. Well, in that instance, one of the biggest of all the marketing campaigns was when Anthony Martignetti was to become a legend in his own time as the boy who was called by his mother from a North End home. Anthony! And Mary Fiumara, seen on the lower right-hand side, who played his mother, became equally famous. Now, I would go to the North End every Saturday with my parents to have lunch with my grandfather at the European. I was only half Italian, and we weren't really raised in a Italian aspect. And every time I heard my name being yelled, I would say, "How do they know me?" And my mother said they don't. But they knew Anthony Martignetti, and he was born and raised in Montalbano, which is the same village my family came from. And he was a fast kid with a buck. So not only was this successful, but it really became in some ways that everyone knew Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day. It was conceived by Jerome O'Leary Advertising Agency, which is in the Park Plaza building, and it was originally for a manufacturing industry association, with the broadening of pasta's appeal beyond those who still preferred their homemade and beyond Italian-American customers. So this was a major shift in that period of the late 50s and 60s with this television commercial seeing the child run. But even Sophia Loren once famously said, spaghetti can be eaten most successfully when you inhale it like a vacuum cleaner. And I think we can all relate to her statement. Everything you see, I owe to spaghetti. Well, let's start eating. Well, if you look as good as Sophia Loren, you realize you also have to have the little booklet they published, Prince Calorie Counter, How to Diet and Still Enjoy Good Food. Well, of course, when we realize that they tell us we can enjoy it, it's 1 cup. I don't think 1 cup would feed me, but the Prince Calorie Counter was an important feature. It showed everything they made, the caloric content, and how you could enjoy it. But of course, their sauce came in very different textures. Prince spaghetti sauce was very marketable. And of course, the Mona Lisa obviously enjoyed it. The original is what we see when we go to visit her painting. And the chunky became something that she enjoyed a little bit too much. The Any Day is Prince Spaghetti Day cookbook was published in 1981. It's a wonderful rendition, and it shows the Herald as an updated young man. And of course, the interior has, again, these very different recipes. Manicotti alla Prince, and they had brajol and chicken cacciatore. Again, things that are very typical in an Italian-American home, especially on Sundays, but very unusual for many people of non-Italian descent to actually enjoy. But in the period of the 1980s, they were still advertising the aspect of Wednesday as Prince Spaghetti Day. On the left-hand side, a tradition of goodness showed that Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day and any day as Prince Pasta Day. So you had elbows, rotini, moscatelli, shells, ziti, rigatoni, spaghetti, linguine, thin spaghetti, I hope is non-skid spaghetti there, but you had noodles, shells, manicotti, and of course, a variety of other things. And of course, how could you enjoy it? Well, with Prince Italian sauce, clam sauce, sauce with meat, sauce with mushrooms, and of course, Parmesan sauce, all made at Spaghettiville in that factory. But the Romano and Parmesan cheese, all pre-grated, would be available in a small jar. It was available, and you could actually have an Italian feast every night of the week. But how do you eat your spaghetti? Well, this is fine, but you might use a rotary spaghetti fork, which would help roll the spaghetti into a ball to enjoy it. And the Prince Stir and Serve fork was a premium for customers. These premiums included dolls, thimbles, dinnerware, and cookware. So again, even as late as the 1970s and 1980s, they were encouraging you to return the Herald premium to preserve in such a way a spaghetti fork. But the whole aspect is, by that period, though they had never sold the building on Commercial Street in Boston's North End, it would actually be converted into condominiums in 1974. Now, surprisingly, this had a wonderful view of Boston Harbor. They became luxury condominiums along with parking. So 1974 was really the very beginning of the condo conversion of not only the South End and the Back Bay, but especially once industrial buildings in Boston's North End. And of course, during that period, the same 60s and 70s, they were also advertising the new Prince Spaghetti Minstrels. Now, this was a group of undergraduate college folk singers who took their name after Prince and performed in radio commercials for the Prince Macaroni Manufacturing Company in Lowell. This was part of a radio and television commercial campaign for Prince Spaghetti products based on the satirical genius of America's #1 advertising guru, Stan Freberg. In the mid-1960s, the group was led by George Hallacy, seen on the first row on the right, and the group toured the college music circuit, appeared on the television show On Broadway Tonight, as well as the Mike Douglas Show. Minstrels in the 60s and 70s was a very popular type of music, but these were people that actually went the other gamut. Some of the greatest hits were things such as Prince Spaghetti Sauce Song, the Prince Cheese Song, the new Prince Spaghetti Minstrels in Concert, and their all-time greatest hit, Gold is the Color of My True Love's Noodle. While seen here, they were a very clean-cut, slick, Roman Catholic college group of students. But one of the biggest songs they sang was On Top of Spaghetti, All Covered with Cheese. I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed. It rolled off the table and onto the floor, and then my poor meatball rolled right out the door. It rolled in the garden and under a bush, and then my poor meatball was nothing but mush. The mush was as tasty could be, and then the next summer it grew into a tree. The tree was all covered with moss, and on it grew meatballs with tomato sauce. So if you eat spaghetti all covered with cheese, hold on to your meatballs whenever you sneeze. How is it we don't sing this anymore? But it shows the aspect of advertising for a business, something that started in 1912 in a very small manner. But in this way, the company had grown by leaps and bounds. And in the late 1980s, Pellegrino decided to sell. In 1987, the Pellegrino family sold the company to Borden. And 2 years later, the pasta plant in Spaghettiville and Lowell stopped operating. There were over 650 employees that lost their jobs. Many of them, not only they, but their parents had worked there as well. And it was not only something that was devastating to the economy, but the building in some instances remained vacant for many, many years. Well, in 2017, Riviana Foods, a subsidiary of Ebro Foods, would actually see with New World Pasta gaining controlling interest of the brand, as well as controlling interest in America in 2020. The brand was sold to Treehouse Foods, which in turn sold the brand to Winland Foods in 2022. So today, Winland Foods produces Prince, but it's not produced in New England. And we realize that young Anthony Martignetti, I'd have been out of breath within a block, but this poor boy ran through the North End. We realized that, yes, that wonderful television commercial of Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day not only made it an iconic commercial, but it was something that really solidified the aspect of a young company starting in 1912 by a group of Italian immigrants who would actually parlay that into something that is known throughout the country. This book, which is due in June of this year, will be published by Fonthill in London. It's a great example in this instance of the different types of books that I've been writing about businesses. I just finished S.S. Pierce that will be out next month. I've also done the Baker Chocolate Company, Jordan Marsh, Filene's, and of course, you begin to realize these types of things are things we relate to. They're shared memories. So I hope I brought a little bit of laughter and memory to you today. Thank you for coming.